Water activities at Sentosa's main beaches were halted after a reported crocodile sighting off Sentosa Cove. On the evening of January 31st, authorities were alerted to the sighting, which was subsequently assessed as valid. As a precaution, swimming and other sea-based activities were suspended at Siloso Beach, Palawan Beach, and Tanjong Beach until further notice. The beaches themselves remained open, but access to the waterline was restricted. On the ground, the impact was immediate and visible. Beach patrol officers and lifeguards directed visitors to stay out of the sea, and safety notices were placed along the shoreline. Visitors could still walk, sit, and take part in land-based activities, but the usual expectation of swimming or paddling was no longer possible. For many families and day trippers, this meant adjusting plans after arrival, particularly during a period when Sentosa typically sees steady weekend footfall. Reactions among beachgoers were mixed but generally calm. Some expressed disappointment at not being able to swim, while others accepted the restrictions as a necessary safety measure. Parents with young children were observed staying further back from the water, and organized water activities were paused. There were no reports of injuries or close encounters at the beaches themselves during this period. The response reflects a familiar approach in Singapore's public space management. While Sentosa's beaches are highly managed and engineered for recreation, they remain part of a wider coastal environment. Large marine animals are uncommon in these areas, but they are not impossible. In such cases, authorities prioritize reducing exposure to risk rather than shutting down entire public spaces. That distinction explains why the beaches stayed open while activities involving entry into the sea were stopped. At this stage, publicly confirmed information is limited to the sighting, the resulting suspension of water activities, and the activation of search and surveillance operations by the relevant agencies. Details such as the animal's exact location after the initial report or how long restrictions will remain in place have not been specified. Until clearer operational updates are released, the situation at Sentosa remains one of precaution rather than emergency. This balance, keeping public spaces accessible while temporarily limiting higher-risk activities, sets the tone for how the incident has unfolded so far, both for visitors on the island and for residents following developments from afar. Following the reported crocodile sighting near Sentosa Cove, the Sentosa Development Corporation and the National Parks Board initiated a joint response. The sighting was assessed as credible, and search and surveillance operations were activated shortly after authorities were alerted. These operations continued beyond the initial report, alongside increased monitoring at Sentosa's beaches. On-site measures focused on clear and practical enforcement. Beach patrol officers and lifeguards were deployed to ensure that visitors did not enter the water. Signage was placed at multiple points along the shoreline to indicate that swimming and other water-based activities were suspended. Staff were observed explaining the situation directly to beachgoers, particularly to families and organized groups that had planned water activities. The decision to suspend water activities rather than close the beaches entirely reflects a risk-based approach commonly used in Singapore's public space management. Entry into the sea presents the highest level of uncertainty in situations involving large marine animals, due to limited visibility and reduced ability to respond quickly. By contrast, remaining on the sand allows risks to be managed through distance, observation, and staff presence. This targeted restriction is designed to reduce exposure while allowing normal use of the area where it can be done safely. Precautionary measures were not limited to Sentosa. The Singapore Land Authority issued advisories for several nearby southern islands, including St. John's Island, Lazarus Island, and Kusu Island, advising the public to avoid water activities until further notice. These advisories reflect the connected nature of Singapore's coastal waters and are intended to prevent similar risks from emerging in other popular recreational areas, while search efforts are ongoing. Authorities also reiterated standard guidance for wildlife encounters. Members of the public were advised to remain calm, keep a safe distance if an animal is spotted, and report sightings through the appropriate official channels rather than approaching the animal or attempting to confirm sightings independently. This approach helps prevent crowding and ensures that responses are coordinated and based on verified information. As of the latest publicly available updates, there has been no confirmation that the animal has been located, captured, or relocated. The continuation of restrictions indicates that the situation is still being assessed. Further decisions, including when water activities may resume, will depend on operational findings rather than fixed timelines. Until then, enforcement at Sentosa remains in place, guided by caution and ongoing monitoring. While a crocodile sighting near a major leisure destination may appear unusual, it is not treated as implausible within Singapore's environmental and safety framework. Singapore's coastline connects open sea, shipping channels, mangrove areas, and river systems. Even highly managed recreational beaches remain part of this broader coastal environment, which is why authorities assess sightings on the basis of risk rather than assumption. From a public safety perspective, the key issue is uncertainty. In the absence of confirmed information about an animal's location or movement, authorities prioritize reducing exposure in the areas where consequences would be most severe. This explains the emphasis on restricting water entry rather than implementing wider closures. The approach aims to prevent close encounters while allowing monitoring and assessment to continue without unnecessary disruption. Singapore has applied similar measures in past wildlife-related incidents. In earlier cases involving crocodile sightings in coastal or nearshore waters, water activities were temporarily suspended while specialists conducted searches and evaluated conditions. These suspensions were lifted only after authorities were satisfied that risks had been addressed. While the details of each incident differ, the underlying response pattern has been consistent. Limit higher-risk behavior first, then restore access once the situation is clearer. This approach also reflects Singapore's broader policy of balancing urban life with natural ecosystems. Wildlife encounters in public spaces are treated as operational challenges rather than extraordinary events. Clear reporting channels, visible enforcement, and incremental restrictions are intended to keep public behavior predictable and manageable during periods of uncertainty. For residents, this context helps explain why the response may appear cautious but measured. The presence of patrols, signage, and advisories is not an indication that danger is imminent, but rather that authorities are acting before uncertainty turns into risk. In that sense, the absence of incidents at the beaches following the sighting suggests that the controls in place have been effective so far. What remains unresolved at this stage is the specific outcome of the search. Public updates have not confirmed whether the animal has been located or whether it has moved away from the area. Until such confirmation is provided, restrictions are likely to remain focused on water activities, with ongoing monitoring forming the basis for any subsequent decisions. For residents, the Sentosa crocodile sighting illustrates how public safety decisions are made when information is incomplete. The response so far is focused on limiting exposure to the highest risk activity, entering the water, while allowing other uses of public space to continue. Beaches remained open, access was managed on the ground, and advisories were extended to nearby islands where similar activities take place. This reflects a precautionary approach rather than a declaration of immediate danger. One practical takeaway is the role of official communication during such incidents. Restrictions and advisories are not signals to speculate or draw conclusions about what may have happened to the animal. They indicate that verification is still underway. Until authorities confirm that the situation has been resolved, temporary limits remain the most straightforward way to manage uncertainty without escalating disruption. Another point of relevance is predictability. For residents and frequent visitors to Sentosa, this incident shows that responses tend to follow a consistent pattern: assess credibility, restrict higher-risk behavior, increase monitoring, and wait for operational confirmation before restoring normal activity. This consistency helps explain why there has been no fixed timeline given for the resumption of swimming or other water-based activities. Decisions will depend on findings from search and surveillance efforts, not on expectations or pressure to reopen quickly. It is also worth noting what has not occurred. There have been no reported injuries, no confirmed encounters at the beaches themselves, and no indication that the situation has escalated beyond precautionary controls. From a public safety standpoint, this suggests that the measures in place have been effective in preventing unnecessary exposure while the situation is assessed. Looking ahead, the most meaningful updates will come from official channels. Clear indicators that water activities can resume would include confirmation that the animal has been located, has moved away from the area, or that monitoring has sufficiently reduced uncertainty. Until then, the absence of detailed updates should not be read as inactivity, but as ongoing assessment behind the scenes. In summary, The Sentosa incident is less about an unexpected disruption and more about how managed public spaces respond to uncertain environmental risks. For residents, the immediate impact has been inconvenience rather than alarm. The longer-term takeaway is reassurance in the process itself, a system designed to act early, communicate limits clearly, and restore normal activity only when conditions allow.